Welcome to the 14th edition of my Pug Fireball and Company podcast, where I focus on America's pastime, both past and present. Are you ready to be entertained, informed, and intrigued by stories of memorable players and epic games? I'm your host, Steve, and let's get going. My guest today is Berg of Minneapolis, Minnesota, a doctor of philosophy, teacher, researcher, writer, and public speaker. He has spent 20 years teaching in higher education, 15 as a professor of philosophy at McMurray College in Jacksonville, Illinois, 3 years as an associate professor at Bemidji State University in Bemidji, Minnesota, and 2 years as an adjunct professor in the Kansas City area. He's also appeared at several public speaking events on the history of baseball, in Minnesota, and on sports and ethics. He's also participated in the Rippey Ruckus, a 3-day baseball tournament in Rippey, Iowa, a town of about 220 people in central Iowa. In addition, he's a Sanders Philosophy and Media Fellow 2025, historian of the Vintage Baseball Association, a book review editor of the Journal of Camus Studies, got it right, a podcast author of Albert Camus Radio, and a member of the International Association of the Philosophy of Sport and Society for American Baseball Research. Good afternoon, Eric.
Yeah, good afternoon. Thanks for having me. This will be great.
Where did you grow up and go to school?
I grew up in Campbell, Minnesota, so that's a very small town. It was about 350 people when I lived there, and it's down to about 150 now. It's in Wilkin County, Minnesota, so west central Minnesota. Sits about 2-3 miles off the North Dakota border, south of Breckenridge, Wahpeton, and then if you're still not familiar, south of Fargo, Moorhead. So I grew up there. And played high school sports in Breckenridge, Minnesota. I played baseball in Breckenridge, Minnesota, and then Legion, American Legion Post 53 in Breckenridge, Minnesota also. And I support the town ball team in Breckenridge through a charitable auction every year. I usually try to get some decent items to bring back there, and they have a fundraiser in April. So the Breckenridge Bucks are playing out of Breckenridge, Minnesota. I think they suspended this year, and it had mostly to do with getting the right number of players together. But they did play 3 years, I think, straight, and then they're planning on coming back in 26. So yeah, way western Minnesota is where I grew up. Very small town.
Okay, you said you played baseball in high school. Did you play it in college?
No, I did not play it in college. After that, so just high school and Legion when I was a kid, and then Little League and then where I grew up, there were just a small number of kids in town, so we really learned the game on the baseball field in Campbell, Minnesota. So
what position did you play?
Oh, I played all over the place. I've been catcher mostly, is where I've played. But one of those things where the team needs you or things like that. But I mostly have played catcher as an adult after the fact. So. And I'm 58, so I'm still able to squat and get down there and those sorts of things.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, I love that position. That what they say about it is true. It's the best view. You see everything, and you're active all the time. I think one of the things that would drive me crazy in the outfield is you can go an entire game with nothing coming to you. But you're going to receive that pitch, and you got to be thinking about the situation. Current situation, what just happened a little bit, and certainly what could possibly happen in the future. So, yeah, I love working the dish. So.
That's why catchers make good managers, supposedly.
Yeah, I think so. You're managing personalities, you're managing the game, you're trying to do a little psychological warfare on the batter and stuff like that. So, yeah, it's there's a lot to be said for that. Yeah.
How did a doctor of philosophy get so interested in baseball?
Well, it's been a lifelong love. I grew up in one of those classic American families where baseball was, really central to us. Twins fans growing up. My dad played baseball after he came home from World War II. He played for the town ball team in Campbell. I have this wonderful photograph of him in his uniform pitching. Well, he's on the farm. He's warming up or he's practicing, I think, on the farm. But he's wearing his Campbell Town Ball uniform, and it would have been 46, 47, something like that. The photograph was taken, and then my close friend of mine, Dan Hinch, a wonderful person that I grew up with, happened to find that particular uniform on an auction. Now, there's no provenance that my father ever wore it, but it is the uniform that he's in, and it survived all those years from Campbell, Minnesota, and I have it hanging in my office here. So it's a
Cool.
fabulous piece of that. But the connection to baseball was I taught at a private liberal arts college, McMurray College. I'm wearing a little McMurray College swag here. McMurray College in Jacksonville, Illinois, and it was a small liberal arts college, so we were always looking for things that would bring in students and also things that would help retention. And one of the things that happened along the way was we got a new college president, and he said, we need to teach some classes to freshmen and sophomores that will grab them and keep them here and give them a really good experience in their first or second year. So he kind of opened up the requirements for what kind of courses faculty could build. And as a philosophy professor, I started looking at the area of the philosophy of sport. And I got real
Hmm.
interested in that, sort of got up to speed on the issues in the literature and philosophy of sport, and then launched this course, which started as a philosophy of sport class, but then it migrated to a baseball class. I called the
Hmm.
class From Plato to Jack Robinson, Social Political Philosophy in Baseball. And it primarily specialized in groups that were excluded from Major League Baseball. So we looked at race, we looked at gender and sex, we looked at disability and impairment, we looked at sexual orientation, all of those groups of folks that haven't had complete access to Major League Baseball. And it became a wildly popular course. It
Hmm.
filled immediately, and it was geared towards freshmen and sophomores, so they would take this course and have a good experience early on in the college and retain it. I fine-tuned that class over the years, and it became sort of a staple of mine that I've always taught, and it's been really great to learn the early history of the game and the social and political aspects of the game has been absolutely fantastic to pick up. That's how the philosophy sort of integrated into that. And now lately, I've joined what's called the International Association for the Philosophy of Sport. And I look primarily at ethics in sports in that area, and that's mostly philosophers. There's people that work in kinesiology departments, there's people that work in sports management departments and coaching, but most people that are in the International Association for the Philosophy of Sport are trained as philosophers. I look at ethics in sports. I don't necessarily look at some of the classic issues like performance enhancing drugs or things like that. What I've been working on lately is the ethics of the intentional hit by pitch. So, as a catcher, I'm the proximate cause of violence. So, at certain points in the game, I can call for a pitch for intimidation, which will threaten somebody, or I can call for violence, and I can call for a hit by pitch. And what strikes a philosopher is that the right thing to do. In my normal everyday life, I would never use violence or intimidation to get my way, but as soon as I cross the chalk line, it's part of the game. So crossing that chalk line makes a real big difference. The ethics, there's philosophers talk about external and internal ethics in sports, and sometimes we don't bring our moral commitments from the outside world into the game, and they change. And that's struck me as very interesting, that I would never use violence or intimidation to get my way outside of the chalk lines, but inside the chalk lines I do that. So my conclusion is yes, it is the right thing to do under certain conditions to pitch inside, or to hit a batter in those particular situations. And then an extension of that is philosophers of sport define sport, and one of the things that is a definition of sport is it's a game. So games and sports are different. Sports sits under the rubric of games, and part of the very core definition of a game is that there's joy in it. We enjoy it. We have fun. We may lose. You may sit down to a Monopoly game and get slaughtered from the beginning, and it didn't seem like that much fun, but the act of playing the game is fun. And again, from my position behind the plate as a catcher, there are times when I intentionally try to strip joy away from a player. And is that the right thing to do? Because we're all out in the field having fun and there's joy in this, but I'll say some things sometimes to a batter that will take the joy out of the game. My best example of this is if, let's say, the opposing shortstop makes a terrible error in their defensive half inning, cost a run. It was a bad error. It wasn't ESPN showstopper play that was trying to be made. It was a routine play that the person did not execute, and it cost their team a run. If that shortstop's coming up to hit in that next inning, one of the things I'll do is I'll look at him. I'm like, hey, don't worry about that error. Get it out of your head. Just take your at bat. Well, that puts the error in his head. That's exactly what it does. That places that failure in his head. Even if he has a very well trained mind behind the plate, it's still going to be rattling around there. That yeah, he booted a ball and he cost his team a run. He opened the floodgates. Maybe we scored 2 or 3 off that. And that takes joy away from him. So is that the right thing to do? Because I don't run around in my normal everyday life making people feel bad. When you step in those chalk lines, yeah, it changes. There's a great mix between the philosophical world and sport, and especially baseball.
Well, of course, baseball has been known for cheating since day one. I mean, you had spitballs, you had doctored baseballs, sign stealing. It's gone on forever.
Yeah, yeah,
Some players and teams are better at it than others. Witness the Houston Astros 3 or 4 years ago.
yes, yep. And
Maybe
that's
you.
manager culture too. The manager will dictate that. There are some managers that if you're not starting, your job is to steal signs, and again, your job is theft then. And in your everyday life, your job, I would think that just about everybody listening to this podcast, their daily job is not theft, but when you cross the chalk lines, it's theft.
You've kind of answered this, but do you ever apply your philosophical approach to baseball? How so?
Yeah, a little bit. One of the things that I think has really the strongest correlation between the two that I've found over the years is I've taught philosophy for over 20 years now in the university level. One thing that the study of philosophy has made me keenly aware of is time, how valuable time is. That you're not getting that back. That these moments are very important. It's important to recognize the past. It's important to anticipate and be ready for the future. But this moment is moving, and it will move into the past. At one time, this moment was the future, anticipating our conversation today. It's here now in the present, but this evening it'll be in the past. That has always made me keenly aware of that. The philosophical world has sort of trained me to think that way. It's very similar on a baseball diamond. The other sports, a clock runs, and it is a artificial part of the game that you're playing. But within baseball, you have these moments, and this is from a catcher's perspective too. I think any ball player recognizes this, but I think catchers are keenly aware of this, that every moment in a baseball game changes the whole complexity of the game. Now, this is not to disparage a right fielder or something. Bruce Tomei, who you interviewed, a great friend of mine, is a great right fielder. But a right fielder would make some sort of mental adjustments in their head for what's going on. But behind the plate, those moments count. Every pitch that's not swung at tells me something, gives me some data that I can maybe help my pitcher get a little bit more successful. Every foul ball tells me a great deal about what's going on. It's anticipating the future. I'm calling this particular pitch to try to get this particular outcome, or at least get this data set established. And then it happens, and then it moves into the past, but it's part of that. So baseball has a rhythm to it that reflects life a lot more than other sports because it is episodic, and things lead to one another in a necessary way. You can look back and say, like when I talked about the catcher booting that ball and maybe opening the floodgates to a bunch of runs. Everybody on the team knew it. There were 2 outs. He got a routine ground ball, and it became a base hit. And then we scored 2 runs. Had he fielded that cleanly and thrown him out, the inning's done. All of those things have a past that move like that, and it's important to see that your life moves like that too. So the idea of time really sort of brings the two together quite easily for me.
Other than the Minnesota Twins and the St. Paul Saints, who, by the way, the Iowa Cubs play because they're in the same league. What is significant about Minnesota baseball history?
Minnesota's got a great baseball history. I teach a community ed class for Hennepin County, which is the metro area for Minneapolis, and I teach a class on the history of baseball for adult learners just for their personal edification, and I teach one on the history of Minnesota baseball. Minnesota has a really, really rich history of baseball. 57 is the first recorded game in Minnesota. That's pretty early. Because 1858 is the set of rules that we usually look back to that we can draw a line between the 2025 rules and the 1858 rules. Before that, you have lots of different variations. So Minnesota and Ninninger, which is way in the southeast side of the cities now, is the very first recorded baseball game in 1857. Bud Fowler played for Stillwater, Minnesota. Bud Fowler is recognized as probably the first African American baseball player to play professional baseball because he played in a league that was established by the standards as being professional, and he spent a whole season playing down in Stillwater, Minnesota, down there. John Donaldson played. He's mostly identified with Bertha, Minnesota, which is not far from where I grew up. It's western Minnesota. John Donaldson was coming at the end of the Negro Leagues. So when integration of baseball happens in 45 through 47 with Robinson, Donaldson's a little bit too old to be moved up at that point, but he plays out his career that way, and he's considered one of the great players. But he's spent a great deal of time playing in Bertha, Minnesota. And there's another fellow that I've personally done a lot of work on, and I'm trying to raise the spotlight on. Prince Honeycutt is his name. Prince Honeycutt is recognized as the first African American baseball player in Minnesota. So in 1873, Prince Honeycutt organizes a baseball team in Fergus Falls, Minnesota. Fergus Falls, Minnesota is central Minnesota. It's heart of the lakes country. It's about 30 miles east of where I grew up. The Ottawa County Historical Society is a fabulous resource there, so well organized and so well put together that I was able to pretty easily research Prince Honeycutt's life. He's a remarkable person. He served as what was considered a mess boy in the Civil War and followed a Captain Compton out to Fergus. Lived in Fergus Falls amongst almost exclusively Swedes and Norwegians. And was, African American from Tennessee, and started a baseball club, the first one, 1873. He's captain of it. He's playing left field. He's hitting leadoff. He became a firefighter, which is a really prestigious position to hold in those years. So, Minnesota has a remarkable baseball history. I'm blessed to live in South Minneapolis right now. I live about 14 blocks from Nicollet Park, where the Minneapolis Millers played and the Minneapolis Millerettes played. Early semi-pro teams just up the street where that park is. So the Saints and the Millers had a long time rivalry. You have the St. Paul Colored Gophers and the Minneapolis Keystones, which were black traveling teams that were very successful. They traveled all around the Midwest and played barnstorming circuits there. So you've got hometown heroes, in Minnesota. That's one of the reasons I love the Twins, is that some of the Twins' decisions are not based strictly on we're going to win. We're going to get this first baseman because we're going to win. Now, that's not to say that the talent isn't there. They've held on to some ball players with extraordinary talent, but they've also treasured the fact that they're Minneapolis kids like Kent Herbeck. He grew up just outside of Met Stadium, and I hear this wonderful story that Herbeck tells that, for his entire life, he'd go over to his mother's house and say, "I'm going to the ballpark." And that's when he was 10, and that's when he was 25. Stop in and see her, and then he'd go off to play in 87 and win a ring. But I'm going to the ballpark, Mom. And leave Joe Mauers, local
Yeah.
kid. The Twins have this real deep respect for history. It only runs back to 1961. But if you go to Target Field, you can take a tour of Target Field, and there's super knowledgeable people that will show you the history of the Twins organization as it traces through there. So, yeah, Minnesota's a great baseball state. Absolutely great baseball state.
Are there any other significant players in Minnesota baseball? You've covered about every one. Of course, when I think of Minnesota baseball, I think of Harmon Killebrew, Tony Oliva. They weren't Minnesotans, but most famous Twins, I suppose.
They became Minnesotans, certainly. Killer is just revered up here for all the right reasons, because every biography you're going to read of Harmon Killebrew is going to reinforce the fact that he was one of the nicest players in the game. You know, he's up there with, like, when you see a list of just really nice ball players that had a ton of talent, it's Brooks Robinson, it's Harmon Killebrew. Those two are going to be mentioned without a doubt. So extraordinary talent. Starts with it's from Idaho and starts with the Senators, and then as the transition happened to Minnesota, not expansion, but moving the Senators here, he comes over with it, and he's just an icon in Minnesota. If you go to the Mall of America, so you can see home plate for Met Stadium. You can also see a chair on the wall for Harmon, the longest home run ever hit in Met Stadium, and they have it sort of using GPS. And where the chair was in Met Stadium, the chair is in the amusement park in Met Stadium by the log ride. There's a chair up there, and that's where the ball landed for Killer's the longest home run in Met Stadium. And then Tony Oliva, Cuban, comes to Minnesota. Comes to the northern tier of professional baseball and becomes Rookie of the Year and becomes one of the greatest outfielders and greatest hitters in the history of the game. And he's a Minnesotan. He lives and dies Minnesota. He lives and dies Twins baseball. He still does a Spanish broadcast for the Twins. He's at just about every game you'll see Tony. And he talks hitting. And the modern players listen. I suppose right away they're like, you hit in the 70s and the 60s. But you start talking, you start listening to Tony talk hitting, and he's right on it. I went to a Sabre convention when it was here in Minneapolis last summer, and they had Rod Carew and they had Tony Oliva talking. And of all the tidbits that they gave the crowd during that conversation, the thing that raised the hairs on the back of my neck was Tony said, Rod and I were roommates almost the entire time, and we would stay up till 3 a.m. talking hitting. Can you imagine that conversation? Two of the greatest hitters in the history of the game, the detail that they must go into about hitting. It'd be like Ted Williams and Tony Gwynn having a conversation, but they never had the chance to overlap like Rod and Tony did. So Rod Carew's another Minnesotan. He left under very, very difficult to talk about circumstances. Rod made his exodus to California, but he's embraced Minnesota again and is as a Twin up and down. There's Frank Viola and Tim Laudner, who still does pre and post game for the Twins, that are just local heroes around here. Al Newman is just an absolute gem. Every time you talk to him, Jock Jones and the list just goes on and on of the Garden hires, Toby and at the St. Paul Saints and Ron at the helm here. I had a chance to get to meet those two, and they're just absolute gems. Tom Kelly, of course, is just a mastermind of baseball. So the significant list runs from the poll ads, from ownership to the management to some of the stars and some of the contributors. Al Newman, the utility man of all in baseball, and was ready to play every spot, every day, against every hitter, all the time. You need those guys on that team to propel the 87 and 91 team forward. So there's just a long list of really good people. And it's remarkable that I did my graduate work in Kansas, so I became a Royals fan when we were there. Still Twins #1, but Royals #2. And then we lived in Illinois for 17 years, and I picked St. Louis as my backup. So it's always the Twins first, and then the Cardinals and the Royals some there. You don't see a lot of players gravitate to the old franchise the way they do in Minnesota. The Cardinals do a nice job with it, and Kansas City does a decent job with it. But, there's guys that didn't play that long for Minnesota, and they identify as Twins. That's their home when they come back to. That's management and that's ownership, but it's also the culture that the Twins have developed over the years that I think is remarkable that way. The list is very long. And even players that didn't play very long and end up having a huge impact, like Tommy Watkins, the current third base coach for the Minnesota Twins. I think he played 9 games in the show, and nobody will ever take that away from him. He played 9 games in the show. He's one of the greatest baseball players of his generation when you consider everybody who played, because he made the show. But he's an exceptional coach. Works his way up from Cedar Rapids, Fort Myers, now on the Twins third base coach. There's something special about people like that know the game and communicate the game in the way that somebody like Tommy Watkins can. The Twins organization is remarkable. Great organization to be a fan of.
Bit of trivia here. My dad was in the same Army unit as Carl Pohlad. I mean, the elder Pohlad. And when he'd go to reunions with his Army buddies, I think Carl was there a lot of the time. So my dad, I don't know how well he knew him, but they were in the same unit anyway.
Yeah, they circulated in the same crowd. That's great. That's great.
Now let's take a break to listen to my other podcasts with such guests as Sam Burnaby and Randy Waho for the Iowa Cubs, and former major leaguers Jim Marshall, Byron Brown, and Rich Nye. You can go to Pug Fireball and Company. That's https://www.youtube.com/@Steve Dunn -09I. You can also get my book, Pug Fireball and Company, 116 Years of Professional Baseball in Des Moines, Iowa, by going to pugfireballandcompany.com. It's available at several bookstores in central Iowa, too. And by the way, the fall 2024 edition of the Annals of Iowa, which is a publication put out by the State Historical Society of Iowa, has a nice review of my latest book. A fun fact, I'm starting to do this on my podcast, taking a fun fact from the book. We'll tie St. Paul in here. On April 30th, 1877, the Des Moines Hawkeyes beat St. Paul 6-4 in 10 innings in the first Northwestern League game at Athletic Park in Des Moines. That park was along the Raccoon River, Southwest 7th Street. It's was about 5 blocks from where the current ballpark is, at the confluence of the Des Moines and Raccoon Rivers. The Hawkeyes were the Des Moines' first professional baseball team. Of course, they had a lot of other names after that, like prohibitionists, politicians, demons, undertakers. That's because the manager of those teams was an undertaker. I worked for a funeral home in the off season, so they called the team the Undertakers. Back in the early 1900s, I learned through my research that the newspapers would run contests to name the team, so the fans would get to name the team for the upcoming season. That's why they had such odd names. You should see the list of the names that didn't make it. There's some doozies.
Those are fascinating enough.
But they haven't done that for decades. I don't think the present owners of the Iowa Cubs would probably go for that.
This team, in fact, did. This is Springfield, Illinois, and they were the Springfield Sliders forever. And when the new ownership group came in, they ran a contest, an old school contest, where there were, people listed names, and then I think they voted on the top 5, and then maybe management took over and picked from those. But they picked the Lucky Horseshoes, is what they picked.
The newspaper polls that I saw, it's actually the fans. I think it's a fan-by-fan vote. Although maybe the ball team had the final say if there's really a dumb name. I don't know.
Yeah, it could be.
The Iowa Oaks, of course, preceded the Iowa Cubs. Des Moines got AAA baseball in '69 after an absence of about 8 years of professional baseball. It was an Oakland A's farm team for quite a while, and there's some great A's who played here. Vida Blue, Joe Rudy, Gene Tennis, George Hendrick. In fact, Blue still holds a couple of strikeout game records and season records. Those records have still held up. So
That's
He
fantastic.
must have been quite a pitcher in his day.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well, let's
Definitely.
get back to the Eric here. Of course, you've kind of answered this. What is your favorite major league team and why? It's obviously the Twins. Who is your favorite major league player,
Yeah,
or was your favorite player, if he's
that's
was a
that's a
past player?
it shouldn't be a complicated question, but it can be. So Carlton Fisk is always got to be right at the top. He's the patron saint of catchers. As a kid, you practice his mannerisms, and study him and etc. And I still have a lot of Pudge Fisk stuff down here. So in my little baseball area down here in my office. So Pudge Fisk is certainly got to be right at the top. When I started playing Legion baseball, and I've been lucky enough to have the uniform because back when I played in the 80s, those uniforms were used over and over and over again, and then just pitched. And I guess the Legion team bought new uniforms for the next year. So my last year of Legion ball, we got to keep our uniforms, and I was given number 17 in the American Legion uniform, and I've worn 17 ever since. I've had to buy some cases of beer and done some other things for players that have had it, but I've almost always been able to wear 17, which isn't a highly sought after number, right? If it's 34 and I'm trying to play up here, forget it. I'd be buying like brand new pickups to try to get 34 on my back. And there haven't been any great twins that have worn 17, so it's not terribly sought after. So, but from that, I adopted also a fandom of Chris Sabo for the Reds. I just liked the way he approached the game. Not a catcher, but a third
All
baseman, which
right.
is kind of that's where catchers tend to go when they're not working the dish is third because you can make that throw. So I do like. I was a fan of. Certainly a fan of Chris Sabo. Tim Laudner was always a great. I always really admired Laudner, and I've been lucky enough to meet him. I go to Twins camp every year. In my second year at Twins camp, Laudner and Herbeck were my coaches, and that was a very the first time I put the gear on and caught for Tim's team was he's he takes tries to make sure those catchers know what they're doing. So great respect for him. And then of course now Joe Mauer. I followed Mauer's career very closely and um, take great respect for him in every aspect of the game. His personality, his off the field professionalism, and of course his skill behind the plate is just exceptional. So
What's he doing these days?
with his girls are exceptional softball players, and he's still very much involved with the Twins there, but he lives here in the cities and family guy, and you get that income and that career done first, and then when you're younger than most people, you can spend a lot of time with your family that way. So I think his life story has worked out pretty well for Joe. So, but he's another canonized baseball saint up here in Minnesota, and he should be.
Was he elected to the Hall of Fame this year?
Yep, first ballot.
I was thinking he was.
Yep, which is remarkable. You don't have a lot of catchers in the hall, and there's arguments who's the best catcher of that generation. Mauer's up against Yachty and Buster. I think Mauer hit better than Yachty and Buster, but I think Buster Posey had something like 27 career passed balls. I'm I've played 2 years up here, and I'm pretty sure I've had like 27 pass balls. So Posey's got that, and Yachty is just Johnny Bench and Yachty are the premium defensive catchers of all time. Yachty didn't hit like Joe, but
No.
Yachty stayed behind the plate longer than Mauer too. So you have a crop there of those three that are really really top shelf. And then I have a long running wonderful baseball argument with one of my best friends whose name is Corn because he likes the other Pudge, and I call him the fake Pudge, the Pudge Rodriguez. Their stats are so close that it's nice because I can edge Corn out a little bit on the Fisk, and then he can back me down on the Rodriguez, and we've gone back and forth for a long time on who's better. It's one of those great baseball arguments that'll never be settled, but they're neck and neck.
What's next for Major League Baseball? Look through the crystal ball. Do you foresee expansion? More rule changes, automated balls and strikes. Of course, we have automated balls and strikes in AAA. I
Yep.
see it quite a lot here in Des Moines. Salary caps, do you think we'll ever see salary caps? What do you think is going to happen in the next 5, 10 years?
I don't think salary caps. I think the expansion of the number of playoff teams satisfies what the salary cap might try to adjust for more parity, because you get a lot of teams and a lot of markets at least getting a taste of the preseason. The Twins can hang those American League Central banners up, all day long, and then they lose in the very next
Yeah,
round. But we've
first
got a
round of the
ton of the
playoffs, they're gone.
exactly. We've got a ton of the Central League,
Yeah,
championships, and I hang my hat on those,
yeah.
against my White Sox friends and etc. So I think that satisfies the taste for cap. We've baseball's always been like this. Everybody hates the Yankees because they buy it, and now the Dodgers buy it. But yeah, they do. Okay, so the highest, some of the highest talent congregates in the East and West Coast in those two teams, and etc. So I have a really close friend who works in analytics for the Rays too. Brother of Corn, and their name's Pig. So this is a baseball family. Everybody has nicknames, and he's always said that it's more about who owns it, not how big the market is, how much they're willing to spend, and who owns it, rather than being New York or LA. So that's always interesting. I don't see a cap coming, in my view. Automated balls and strikes are going to happen. I go to Saints games too, and I'm surprisingly, for my age and the fact that I study baseball history and I've played it my whole life, I'm not much of a traditionalist. I like the Savannah Bananas. I think they bring a great awakening to the game. I have another very close friend. He was actually my student at McMurray, and then he came back to be head baseball coach, and we've remained friends. Andrew Bartman. He works for the Savannah Bananas now. He worked for Team USA Baseball before that, so I've been able to follow Bananas a little bit closer from the inside. I think that brings the right a new element to the game. You get a lot of traditionalists that just hate the Bananas, and I don't. The automated strike zone, yeah, I umpired for a living in graduate school. I like umpiring. I know umpires. Bruce is an umpire. Certainly Tome, who you've had on. Um, but I also like going to Saints games and seeing where that ball is, seeing it on the black, and getting the battery to be able to pay it off for that pitch on the black. I like when umpires develop a zone. I think it gives a catcher an advantage to know that he's not seeing anything low. He's either doesn't have a good view. I'm a pretty big guy, so he's not. And I don't go down as low as the modern catchers. I use the 80s, regular squat. So we're just not going to feed really well in the zones, and that's idiosyncratic. The very next game may be a completely different deal there. So I do like the variances of an umpire, but I think in Major League Baseball you're going to go to an automated strike zone. I don't know how they're going to deal with the finances of the umpiring crew being trimmed down and eliminated that way. That's a very
They could still keep it the way it is in AAA,
yeah
where the umpire is still making most of the decisions.
yeah
Or else you would go where it'd always be called by a computer, and the computer would just relay a message to the umpire whether it's ball or strike,
yeah
and the umpire would never call any balls or strikes.
yeah.
But then you almost wouldn't have the need for an umpire behind home plate.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
don't
I
think
guess you're
it'll
right.
get. I don't think it'll ever come to that.
Yeah, but he might have more flexibility as to where to be and things like that. So
I
it
don't
takes some
mind
of the
that.
heat
I
out.
don't mind the way they do it in AAA here. It's not bad. It's kind of interesting to see where the ball really was. Even if it ticks the side of the zone, even by an eighth of an inch, it's still called a
Yes,
strike.
still
It
called a
doesn't have to
strike.
be
Yep.
in the zone. It can be out of the zone, but touching the zone, and it's
Touching
still a
the zone, those
strike.
are when they're executed like that. Yep. Yeah, those are great. Expansion, yeah, I expansion or relocation. I think the Florida market is way oversaturated. Like I said, I have a friend on the inside with Tampa, and those two franchises, neither one is fabulous in terms of draw and fan base, and it's a baseball area kind of. Um, but I think you'll see at least one of those, if not both of them, relocated. And I think the Trop falling apart will put some legs underneath the Tampa franchise from to maybe move around a little bit. Now, politics aside, I would love my so if I could wave a magic wand and eliminate any barriers. I'd love to see a professional team in Havana. I think that would be so cool to have that right off the coast of Florida there, and Havana and Cuba is such a baseball world unto its own. I think that would Havana would be great. I'd love to see more baseball back in Canada. There's this draw for Montreal and draw for a renewed Expos franchise. Toronto is a very successful franchise, so I would love to see Canada. Mexico, I think, would be a great location. I know that they queried Mexico City years ago, but it was air pollution that kept Major League Baseball out. It just wouldn't be healthy for the players to play in Mexico City proper, but there are certainly other locations in Mexico that could handle a professional franchise today. So I think you'll see a combination, maybe a relocation of a couple franchises, with the Oakland franchise, and then maybe one of the Florida franchises, and then you might see some expansion after that. I think it's healthy for the game. Thank the Lord we didn't have contraction when they wanted to contract Minnesota, so that's good. But I think you'll see some of that. I think you'll see more international play too. There's a pretty strong desire to make some stronger actual connections between Korean baseball and Japanese baseball and the Major League game that's played here, because during COVID I fell in love with Korean baseball because they have a Twins team. LG.
Oh, do they? Oh.
Yeah, the LG Twins. LG, that electronics company, makes dryers and stuff. They're the LG Twins. So, and they were, because there was no Major League Baseball on, it was really easy to find the LG Twins and follow them. And so I got a taste for Korean baseball, and then the Japanese professional game is a fabulous aspect of the game too. So the logistics of getting there, I think, is hard. But I think you'll see some of that. But I think we'll see expansion there. I don't know about other rule changes. That's the torpedo bat is hot now for the right hitter. It's legal. It's been around a long time. You go back to like 1921, you see a lot of torpedo bats in the dead ball era. And for the right hitter, but it's neat to see those innovations come around. It's neat to see that a style of bat that was forgotten for a very long time is now really helping some hitters hit a little better and things like that. The communicating of the called pitch, that's fine. It's something I'll never do because that's super expensive, and I just play in a amateur 47 and over league now. So, it's hand signals and those are still kind of fun. But yeah, those are neat. And being able to it takes the thing that I don't like. Here's an innovation that I don't like, which does make me sound like a little bit of an old man baseball guy, is I don't like that the outfielders refer to a card on where to be. I think that's part of the game to know. You're going to take 6 steps to your right for this guy because I've looked at that in advance and I know this is where I'm going to be, or moving in or moving out. And then that's also the job of the catcher. If you got somebody who's not paying attention out there, you move them over a little bit, and I don't like the cheat sheet for where we're going to be. That I just think that ball players are capable and they should know where to be, because I think if you look at the cheat sheet sometimes and move, then you forget why you're there. Well, I'm supposed to be 6 steps over, so I go 6 steps over. Realize you're moving 6 steps over because that's where the ball tends to go, and you may not be as ready, or you may cheat a little less. Like, well, now they're throwing just breaking stuff to this guy, so I'm going to move this way. But if the cheat sheet tells you stay here, and the pitching changed, you're not thinking enough about the game, I don't think.
Yeah, you could move 6 steps over, but the pitcher throws a slow curve and the guy pulls it, instead of getting it to left center, he pulls it down the line. And
yeah. I was talking to a guy once, not my friend for Tampa, another guy, who said one of the really great things that he watches as an analytics person for a team that plays against the Twins is they watch Byron Buxton's feet. Buxton will make these very small changes in how his feet are positioned every pitch, and it's not a nervous habit. It's not getting pressure off its back. It's Buxton knowing the situation down to the very smallest detail every time. He can see what that pitch is going to be, or now he's probably hearing it with the communicator. He knows what the pitcher's doing. He knows the history of the batter. He knows the history of the park. He knows what he's done in the last 3 pitches or 2 at bats. And his feet will just move a little bit, and that gives him, a quarter-inch more jump, and that's why he can make the catches like he did last night, because mentally He's 100% locked in on that situation, and then he gives his body every advantage that it can, and he has an amazing athletic talent. So that's part of this game that is just so remarkable to me, that you get talent like Buxton in the outfield, and they think really carefully about everything that they're doing because they're playing at the very highest level, and they should.
One last question here. What do you like about playing in the Rippy Ruckus, which was held last weekend, I believe?
Yeah, it's 100% the people. It's great. It is absolutely great. Bruce Tomei is an Iowa gem. You step on a ball field with Bruce and you're friends with him. And I've been lucky enough to become very close friends with Bruce. He plays with my Minneapolis team when he can get up here, and we go to Florida together and stayed at my home, and I've stayed at his home. It's people like Bruce. You meet such a wide variety of people at the Ruckus, and nobody's there for the trophy. Nobody's there to stream it live on YouTube or anything. Everybody's there to play baseball in rural Iowa in a small town that loves baseball. And you feel like a minor celebrity for a weekend because you've come down from Minneapolis, or you've come from Kansas City, or you've come from Chicago or South Dakota, and you're there to play baseball as an older guy and try to play it to the best of your ability. But it's on the field, of course, but it's the dugout, and then it's the group of guys behind the dugout in the chairs talking that just warms your heart when you're at the Rippy Ruckus. It is the personification of American baseball. That is, because everybody's there to play. They might be their very last season that they'll play. You never know at our age, and you're playing against and with people that you've played a lot of baseball against, and you meet new people that come in, and you realize the guys from Kansas City and the guys from Chicago love the game in the same way as the Minnesota and the Iowa guys love the game. So it's just an honor. Usually when I play in the Ruckus, I play for Rippy, which is, just an honor to put on that purple jersey and play for that small town, because it connects with my baseball history. That Rippy is Campbell. Except we don't have a ballpark in Campbell anymore, but Rippy's Campbell. And when I put on that purple jersey, and just as a fluke, my school colors when I was at Campbell were purple too. So when I put on that purple jersey, it really connects me to when I was learning the game in the 70s up in Campbell. So the Ruckus. The best way to talk about the Rippy Ruckus is that quote from Moneyball: "Is how can't you be romantic about baseball?" It is that thing. Rippy is the premium example of why baseball is such a romantic sport. Yeah, it's great.
Well, thanks, Bruce, for spending part of your day with us. Don't forget the Iowa Cubs continue their 6-game series at home against the Buffalo Bisons tonight, and it's Wednesday when we're doing this, but they play through Sunday. The Bisons are the AAA affiliate of the Toronto Blue Jays. With that, I'll say good afternoon, everyone.